Hey everyone. I haven't done a compilation in a while, so I thought it would be the perfect time to do one before we head off into the weekend. This is over 2 hours of some of the creepiest almost kidnapping stories. I hope you all enjoy the stories, and please be safe and enjoy your weekend. And without further ado, let's jump into the stories. And remember to always stay hungry. My name is Aki, and the story I'm going to share took place on my reservation in Alberta, Canada. I'm not sure if you all know about the MMIW movement, missing and murdered Indigenous women, but it's an ongoing national crisis across Canada. Just for a basic understanding, it is a fact that Indigenous women represent 10% of the total population of missing women in Canada, and they're also 10 times more likely to be murdered than all other ethnicities. For the longest time, since I was maybe about 7 or 8 years old, I was always constantly told by everyone to be careful while playing outside because someone might take me away. As I grew up, I kept that in the back of my mind because it was just so scary to imagine. But deep down, I never actually thought it would happen to me. This took place in the summer of 2015, when I was only 15 years old and I was with an old friend that we can call T. T and I were at my grandma's house making plans to walk to my other friend's house that was about an hour walk. The both of us were used to us walking around, especially at night, and around this time, the sun was slowly going down, and we decided that we better head out while there's still sunlight. Our surroundings were fields, hills, and an empty gravel road. I should mention that we had already passed by the last 3 houses, so after that we were completely isolated from everyone around us. As we were walking on this empty gravel road, we had talked about a lot of things just to pass time, and we randomly brought up kidnappings. A young woman had went missing on our reserve in August of 2011, so naturally, it was on our minds during this conversation. It had started to scare us because it was getting darker, and we also noticed a car coming down the road. I remember latching arms very tightly and repeated saying to ourselves, "Please go past us," and thankfully they did. I noticed they were the people who lived near my grandma. After that, we fully believed we were just being paranoid from our stories, so we tried changing the topic. When suddenly, I had heard another vehicle coming down the road. Since we were both still very on edge, I decided I was going to turn around and see if I had noticed that vehicle as well, and that's when my heart dropped to my stomach. It was a stereotypical pervert van that was dark blue, and it also had bright orange tire rims and mirrors that both looked to be hand-painted. I quickly turned around and told T, "Oh my God, it's a van." T then quickly pushed me into a ditch to walk further from the road, and as we did that, I noticed the vehicle started driving slower and slower as they approached us. Once the van got beside us, it basically was only rolling, and that's when I noticed that there were 2 white men in the van. The driver was about 40 to 50, bald, wore a white sleeveless t-shirt, sort of big and had bright blue eyes, and the passenger was maybe 35 to 40, also wearing a white sleeveless t-shirt, very skinny, and had some hair but not a lot either. As I looked at the van a bit more, I noticed that the back windows were also painted dark blue so that nobody could see the inside of it. Once I had seen this and who was driving, I started to freak out, and I'd grabbed onto T's arm for comfort. That's when the driver then said, "Where are you ladies going? Y'all need a ride?" T quickly replied with, "No thank you," while pushing me closer towards the barbed wire fence. The driver quickly responded with, "No, let me give you girls a ride. It's not a problem, really." To which T then responded back with a stern voice, "No, we don't need a ride. Please go away." That's when the van then came to a complete stop, and we both heard the driver then say in an angry tone to his passenger, "All right, get out and go get them." And with no hesitation, T then pushed me to run. Very quickly, T grabbed the barbed wire fence to open it, and I jumped through it, but I'd gotten caught in it and scratched my knee up. But the adrenaline made me feel no pain, only panic. Once T got through, we both ran down the hill, not looking back even once. There were bushes and tall grass that we ran through, and we knew that there was mice and snakes in those areas, but in that moment, we didn't care. We had finally gotten within an eye's view of my friend's house, but it was still a ways away, so we decided to hide in the bushes for a moment. As I was looking up the hill, I noticed the van was driving very slowly along the edge of the hills to try and see where we ran off to. We both had thought that maybe they'd drive off since we were hiding, but to our horror, they had found the road and proceeded to still search for us. Thankfully, however, they drove right past us without noticing us hiding. Once we had seen that they were far away, we got up and ran as fast as possible as we could to my friend's house. Once we got there, we immediately told my friend's parents, and they told us to both tell our moms. I gave as much information as I could to my mom, but there wasn't really much else she could do besides forbidding me from walking anywhere ever again. I know you're probably all wondering why I didn't call the police, but unfortunately, it's very common for the police to not help during these situations. The trust for police is truly non-existent, especially for my reservation and specifically my family. It's also just very common for police to ignore Indigenous people's concerns in general, all across Canada. With that being said, I've never informed the situation to the police. I was just afraid of them not believing our story and dismissing it. There simply just wasn't enough evidence, and I didn't have a cell phone at the time either to capture pictures or videos. Although I truly wish we had tried to report it anyway, especially for records and the community's safety, because to this day, 8 years later, I still see this van sometimes around. I also have a few pictures of the van as well. When I went to get gas up sometime in July, I had seen the exact same man who was driving that van, and I just stared at him with a mean face while shaking my head at him. I'm not sure if he even recognized me or not. Maybe I simply just made him uncomfortable, but he immediately put his head down, got into his van, and drove off. That was a moment that I will never forget for my entire life. I often ask myself what would have happened if we didn't run. Would I even be here to share this story today at 23 years old? It's something that I think back to a lot. That day showed me the true dangers of being an Indigenous woman in Canada. To all my Indigenous people, please be careful out there. Never be too trusting, and always trust your gut. And to those two creepy men, I have many pictures of your unique colored van. I know your faces, and I even know where you live. I hope you know that everybody knows about your actions, so let's never meet face to face again. I'm a 16-year-old male in my junior year of high school. I was recently listening to these types of stories on YouTube, and it reminded me of something that happened to me in middle school. It was my winter break of my 7th grade year, and a neighbor of mine who lived down the street had hired me to dog sit while their family was on vacation for the week. The mom of the family was friends with my mom, and the walk from my house to theirs was only about 5 minutes, so my parents had no issue with it. I was given the tasks of going to their house 3 times a day to feed and water the dog, as well as let it use the bathroom, play with them, etc. The first few days went completely normal. I would walk to and from without any issues, and I was honestly enjoying getting out in the winter weather and playing with the dog. I live in Arizona, so cold weather is a blessing here. On one of the few last days of dog sitting, I had woke up late and I saw that my phone was dead. I didn't have time to wait for it to charge as I had woken up late, and I had to make sure the neighbor's dog hadn't had an accident in their house. I decided I would just wait until I was home to check my phone. I then got ready and walked over to the neighbor's house like usual. When I got inside, thankfully the dog hadn't made an accident on the floor, which made me very happy because I wasn't trying to clean that up. I took care of my duties and was ready to walk home. I left out the front door, and as I was locking it behind me, I had seen a vehicle driving by very slowly in my peripheral vision. I turned and I saw a man in a black truck driving abnormally slow past the house and down the road in the direction I would need to walk in order to get home. I wasn't overly concerned about this, and I just assumed that they were checking their GPS and looking for a certain address or something like that. So I then started to walk home. Note, I'm on the left side of the road on the sidewalk. As I'm walking, the truck is still only maybe about 40 feet ahead of me on the opposite side, and not even 20 seconds into my walk, the truck pulls into the wrong side of the road and parks about 15 feet ahead of me. I was very paranoid as a child, and thank God I was. The man parking in front of me so hurriedly just scared me, even though I knew it was possible he was just pulling up to that house. I then decided then it's better safe than sorry, and I then started sprinting back towards my neighbor's house. As soon as I did that, the truck sped out of the parking spot it was in, turned around, and started driving towards me. See, when I was in middle school, I was going through my chubby phase, so I wasn't a fast runner at all, but the house was close enough that I wouldn't run out of breath too quickly. I fumbled the keys in my hand as I unlocked the door, practically falling in the house. I slammed the door shut and then locked it immediately. I went to reach for my phone to call and wake my dad to come get me, but then I remembered it was dead and it was sitting on the floor of my bedroom. I watched out of the little window next to the door, and I saw the same truck slowly driving by the house at least 3 times. I decided that now I would just go in the living room for a while and just watch TV just to play it safe. I wasn't worried that the man would try and break in or anything. I was more so worried he would be waiting outside the door or something. I had hoped that maybe I was overreacting and that it was all just one big coincidence and that the man really was just trying to find a house. Well, after about 20 minutes of sitting inside, I was sure that the man would be gone by now. I then peeked out the front window and even went upstairs to look out one of the upstairs windows for a fuller view, and there was no truck in sight, at least from what I could tell. It was then that I decided that I must have just been paranoid and was being ridiculous, and I was ready to walk home. I again walked out front and I locked up the house, this time looking over my shoulder. I didn't see anyone, so I started the walk, this time fully aware of my surroundings. I was looking all around trying to make sure the truck was actually gone this time, and just when I thought I was in the clear, I saw it. The same truck parked on the corner at the end of the street. I wanted to run home, but in order to do that, I'd have to run right past the truck, and I knew that my little chubby ass wouldn't be able to outrun the man or even the truck for that matter. So once again, I started to run back towards the neighbor's house, this time tears rolling down my face. Up until then, that was by far the most scared I'd ever felt. I'm not exaggerating when I say that the truck was maybe about 5 feet behind me as I got to the driveway of the house. I ran inside again, slamming and locking the door. For some reason, the thought had never even crossed my mind that there could be a house phone there. I just sat inside the house for over an hour holding the dog and crying. I didn't know what to do, and as a young child who hadn't been diagnosed with anxiety yet, I was having a full-blown panic attack on the floor with no one there. Eventually, I had finally built up the courage to go out again and just sprint home. I got outside and locked the door as fast as I could, and then started booking it. I guess the adrenaline was really flowing because my chubby little legs were pushing it. I then saw the truck pull around the corner, and this guy was still there. I don't know why he didn't assume that I'd called the police or my parents and just left at that point. Maybe he actually knew that the neighbors were out of town and that a kid was watching the place, so he assumed I wouldn't have a phone or something. Or maybe he was just dumb. I heard the truck picking up behind me, and by this point I felt like I was going to pass out from a mixture of fear, lack of breath, and just pure panic. I was within about 30 feet of my house when the truck pulled right in front of me and stopped. I then sprinted across the street through my next door neighbor's yard and into mine, quickly unlocking my door. At this point, I was fully sobbing, and I felt as if I was going to throw up all over the place. My dad, who had just woken up and was making his morning coffee, had heard the commotion and then came out of the kitchen asking what was wrong. I tried to explain between breaths, but I had struggled to get anything out. By the time that I was able to tell him what happened, the man would have been long gone. I had no identifying features other than the fact that he drove a black truck. My dad thought I was overreacting and maybe that it wasn't the same truck, but I know for a fact that it was. It really seemed like my dad wasn't taking me serious about any of this, but he did at least still comfort me and made me some breakfast. It may seem like I'm overreacting, as the car had just moved and parked a few times, but if you saw the way the man was driving and how it was every time I was moving, you would know that his intentions were bad. I really don't like to think about what would have happened had the man successfully caught me. Although I will never forget this experience, as it really taught me a valuable lesson. Always be aware of your surroundings, and on top of that, if you're able to, always try and keep your phone fully charged, as you never know when an emergency could arise. Be safe out there, everyone, and always trust your instincts, as it could be the very thing that saves you. The story took place when I was 17. I lived in a rather small town next to a big city where my boyfriend lived at. Most days I would visit him at his house in the city that he had shared with 3 older brothers. One day on my way to see my boyfriend, I had noticed a white van behind me, like one of those typical sketchy tinted window vans everyone thinks of when they think of a kidnapper vehicle. But I didn't think too much about it. I thought that just maybe we were going in the same direction. But later into the trip, I noticed the same white van is still behind me. I started to get really nervous, but just tried to blow it off. So as I continued my trip, I tried to not focus on the van behind me, and I drove all the way to my boyfriend's house. The next thing I know, I parked in front of his house with the same van parked right behind me. That's when I knew that this wasn't just a coincidence, and I started to freak out and didn't know what to do. So I then decided to call my boyfriend and ask him to come to the front door and get me. He agreed, and the second he stepped out of the house, the van sped off. I then rushed inside, telling him everything that happened. My boyfriend convinced me that we needed to call the police and report it. We did call, but since we didn't have enough information, they pretty much told us that there was really nothing they could do. So fast forward a few weeks later, I was watching the local news and I had saw a headline about a group in my area caught kidnapping and sex trafficking many young women. They also had a picture of the van identical to the same van that followed me that day that it happened. I really tried to convince myself that it couldn't be the same one. But then, I saw the same tinted windows and the same gray duct tape holding the smashed passenger side mirror in place. I knew that it was the same one. It truly makes me sick to think about what might have happened to me if I had decided to get out of that car that night. It has definitely taught me to be more aware of my surroundings, but the amount of trauma it's given me will be with me for the rest of my life. Please be safe out there, everyone. For context, I'm a 23-year-old Caucasian female, and I live in South Africa. I'm about 5'5" in height, and I've always been petite with a baby face. This has probably been the main reason that I've had so many encounters with creeps and stalkers, especially in an area with a high crime rate. And my fellow South Africans can relate. I work in the modeling industry part-time, so I get a lot of unwanted attention even on the days I'm off work. This was one such day. Not too long ago, I was at the mall with my mother looking for some new clothes and makeup, having a mom and daughter type of day. The whole time though, my mom kept looking around, seemingly distracted by something. So I asked her what she was looking for. My mom had then whispered to me that she didn't like the way that this one guy was looking at me. and then gestured with her head to someone behind us. My mom has always been very overprotective of me, to the point of paranoia, and I just assumed that she was just having another one of her mama bear moments. I did, however, look behind us, and sure enough, there was a tall man in a thick black winter jacket, winter pants, and boots, just browsing the makeup aisle. This was pretty weird as it was in the middle of the summer. My mom and I were both wearing sundresses and sandals because it was just that hot, even in the mall. I conceded that he gave a weird vibe, and we moved to the next aisle over. But this is where things started getting truly weird. It seemed that whatever aisle we moved to, the man followed us there. This continued for about 10 or so minutes before my mom suggested we leave as she wasn't comfortable. We both headed to the exit of the mall and decided to head home. We didn't get anything as my mom was just really weirded out by that guy. As we were leaving the exit though, the man continued to seemingly follow us from a distance, and this really freaked us out. Why we didn't just head to security, I don't know. My mom and I just wanted to leave as quickly as we could at that point. As we got to the parking lot, the man had actually caught up to us and approached us. He asked us if we knew where to find a phone repair store. This was really weird even of itself because in order to leave this exit, you walk by several repair stores. My mom grabbed my arm and pulled me behind her and then firmly told him, "No, we don't," as she then began pulling me to the area where we parked our car at. The dude had an angry look on his face as he held up his phone, again saying that he needed to find a repair shop right now, that it was urgent. He then turned to me and asked, "Can you please take me to the nearest repair shop? My English isn't good." I actually kind of started to feel bad for this guy, thinking this guy was just a foreigner and needed some help navigating the area. So I then began to say, "Okay, there's just one inside the mall when you left. You can't miss it." He again asked if I can take him to it directly, as he can't understand English. But my mom grabbed me more firmly, then said, "No, we can't help you." She was now shaking at this point. The man just looked at us and had seemingly gave up as he walked away. Now, something to note about this mall. There are these very large white pillars as you exit, and you can't really see anything in front or behind it, as it has these shrubs around the base for decoration. That was when the strangest thing had happened. A man had walked out from behind the pillar and had held up his phone to my face and straight up took a flash photo of me close up. This happened really quickly, and both my mom and I just stood there in shock, trying to process what the fuck is happening. Before we could even shout or yell at this man, both him and the man from earlier suddenly took off running together into the parking lot. They then jumped into a car that then sped off. My mom still had a firm grip on my arm that only increased as we both stood there completely flabbergasted at what happened. At this point, we both went back inside the mall to call for security, which we should have done in the first place. It was there that we learned some shocking truths. The security guard had informed us that there had been women going missing in that mall very recently. There should have been an article about the missing girls in the news. To this day, they still haven't been found. I honestly don't know if what happened to my mom and I was at all related to those missing girls, but it really all seemed too suspicious to not be. We did go to the police and they told us they would review the mall security footage, but we never got a call back from them for any updates. Stay safe out there, girls. If not for my mom being so overprotective and paranoid, I never would have known that that man was following us. This happened to me 4 years ago when I was 14 years old. Being a teenager, I loved being outside and exploring the ditch that we have behind our house. Keep in mind, I live out in the country, and our yard is 2 acres on top of a hill. One day as I was coming up from the ditch and had made it to my driveway, I saw a white truck with orange lights at the top of the roof go past our driveway. It went pretty slow once it got to my driveway, but of course, I didn't think anything of it. I walked over to a tree that was close to the road because we had a tree stand that I sat on. As I was sitting there, once again, I saw that same white truck slowly go past my house. At first, I believed that this person just went the wrong way, but then I realized that they could have just went down the next street and that they didn't have to turn around. I brushed it off and thought that maybe they didn't know to go down the next street. I watched it go slow all the way down the hill until they made it to the stop sign. Even though there were no cars coming from either side, they literally just sat there for quite a while. I was then starting to get really nervous because they could have been gone a long time ago. After sitting there a while, they finally turned left, but not for long. After turning left, they then turned right and then turned around right there. They then again sat for a while. Keep in mind, I live on a hill, so I can see this truck perfectly, and I believe they could see me as well. They may not be able to see me well because they're pretty far, but they would still see me if I were to move or got down from the tree stand. I still sat where I was because I wanted to see if it was just a coincidence. After a while, the truck finally started driving back in my direction. It started coming up my road slowly once again. I was so scared because now I knew it wasn't a coincidence. This time they had their window down just a little bit, and I saw that it was a bald black guy. Not being racist, just mentioning what he looked like. At the time we had cameras, so I knew if something happened to me it would be all caught. But of course I didn't want to take any chances, so I got down and started walking back to my house. As I was walking, I saw the white truck yet again. I then started running to my front door and I made it inside. I didn't know what to do. I also knew that my dad wouldn't take me serious, so I just kept it quiet. I did tell my mom though, and she just told me to be careful while being outside. Now I truly wish I could say that was the only time this happened, but about a week later, I was outside once again. But this time I was with my friend Savannah, who was like a sister to me. She lived across the street, and we were always at each other's houses. We were at my house when this took place. As we were hanging outside, I noticed yet again a white truck with orange lights at the top go slowly past our driveway. I had already told Savannah what happened to me the last time with the white truck, so when I saw it, I got really scared and I told her that I believed that it was the same truck. We both agreed to see if it would come back down our street, and sure enough, it did. We both watched it go slowly past our driveway, but this time it didn't make it to the stop sign. The truck had stopped right before the stop sign and then started to slowly back up some. It then just sat there for a good while, and once again, there were no cars coming on either side. We knew that it was really strange for the truck to back up like that. Savannah and I didn't know what to do, and since we wanted to know what this truck was doing, we just hid behind my dad's truck and just watched it. Once I saw this happening again, I knew that it wasn't a coincidence this time. After the truck had sat there for a while, it finally started to drive right back down the hill, but instead of turning left or right, it turned around and started slowly going back up our street. We were so shocked and petrified. As the man was going back up, I did notice that his window was slightly down once again, and again, I saw that it was the same bald black guy from before. Since we knew that all of this would be on camera, we decided that we were going to get the courage to go tell my dad. As we were walking to my front door, we saw the truck coming back yet again. Before we went inside though, I wanted to see what it was going to do this time. I looked behind my dad's truck and I saw him turn left. But just like last time, he then turned right and turned right around and just sat. We then went inside freaking out and trying to tell my dad about it. No joke, he didn't even take us serious and just told us whatever. We knew that he wouldn't believe us, but we at least wanted to try. So we then went back out, and the truck was still sitting there. Savannah and I just pretty much went back to what we were doing before this whole situation, but the truck then slowly came back up our street. We finally just decided to stay inside after that and just watch movies instead of taking any more chances with the creepy guy in his truck. After those incidents, I was actually terrified of white trucks for a good while. I'm 18 years old now, and I still live in the same house, and so far, I haven't seen that truck since. Please everyone, stay safe out there. Creeps can be anywhere. And to the weird guy with that stupid white truck, please stay the hell out of my neighborhood. The story happened about a month ago, and I'm still a bit shaken up about it. It was around 8 p.m. on a Saturday, and it was quite a peaceful night. My girlfriend and I were in bed just chilling and watching Netflix, when out of nowhere, there was this distant blood-curdling scream. I wasn't too bothered by it as the neighboring complex has a bunch of rowdy children who often scream at the top of their lungs. So I just brushed it off as that. But my girlfriend was pretty adamant that it didn't sound like the children and that this scream sounded different. So we ended up pausing our Netflix show and went to stand by the window, listening if we could hear it again. There was just silence for a few minutes, and just as I was about to tell her that everything seemed fine, there it was yet again. She was right. This was definitely not some rowdy kids. It sounded like a woman screaming her lungs out. I opened up the window wider, trying to hear where the scream was coming from, as it was quite distant. I then just hear the words, "Help me!" being screamed over and over again. And this time I could hear that it was actually a man who had been screaming. I told my girlfriend to unlock the door while I grabbed my car keys and shoes. We ran down 3 flights of stairs to the car. I really don't know what exactly we were going to do, but I just knew that we had to go and help this guy. By the time we got to the car, the night was completely silent again. We drove down the street in the direction we heard the screaming coming from, and we saw that the neighboring complex had its gate wide open, but with no one there. This was really odd, as this complex always has its gate closed, except for whenever someone's going in or out of the complex. The complex also looked so dark and dreary. Not a single light was on. It looked like something out of a horror movie. We continued driving up and down the streets, trying to see if we could see anyone needing help, but there was no one in sight. After a few minutes, the security came past and asked a few questions before then investigating the complex themselves. We gave them our number for any updates, but not surprisingly, we were never updated on the situation. Just about a week later, my girlfriend and I were going past the store for some groceries. As I was walking in, she had pulled me back to show me a printed piece of paper which was stuck on the wall outside of the store. It was a missing persons poster. The last place the person was seen on was the same street that we heard the screaming at. We're honestly not sure, but we really believe that someone was possibly kidnapped on that street, and just the thought of that freaks us the hell out. I'm a 23-year-old female that lives with my boyfriend and parents in rural Australia, just a few hours out of Sydney. The story didn't happen to me, but to my mother just a few nights ago. She had just finished a later shift at the club that she works at, and because it's on the farther side of the town, she takes the dark country road home. You know, the kind with no streetlights and only a few houses dotted around. It was 10 p.m. on this road when she came across a white hatchback van type of car parked on the side of the road. A guy stepped out and into her lane and waved his arms. Thinking that he had hit a kangaroo or something and was warning her of something on the road, she stopped. She put down the passenger window a bit, and the guy then spoke rather quickly, and she couldn't understand him. All she got from him was him asking for her phone and that his car was broken down. She said that she didn't have one, and he pointed to her phone in the passenger seat, to which she then replied that you don't get good service in that area, which was true. It was then that my mom saw his phone light up in his car, so she knew he was lying. Meanwhile, the guy is pacing up and down the length of her car, comes back to the window, talks quickly again, and then asks her to pull up in front of his car. At this point, my mother's weighing her options while this guy is still pacing. My mother, not knowing if her doors would lock while the keys were in the ignition, tried it anyway as the guy walked around to the driver's door. She then locked it just in time, because the second she did, the guy tried to open the driver's side door. My mother then floored it, and she watched the guy in her mirror get in his car and then drive off, then turning down a different street. So clearly his car was fine. My mother called the police, but obviously the guy was gone at that point. She posted the story on Facebook that night just to warn people. I personally believe that this guy was on drugs, but I'm not really sure. Anyway, some of her friends commented on the post saying that they're glad she was okay. However, there was actually another lady that posted in a Facebook group that week before for a suburb 20 minutes up the road. The lady was going for a walk when a white car, the same kind, came flying up the road. It then quickly stopped, and a well-dressed man got out and approached her, and he told her she looked interesting. She told him she couldn't talk because she was in a hurry, and she said that she had to get home to her family. The man then followed her on foot for a short distance, before then getting back into his car and leaving. Right around the time this incident happened, I was laying in bed, and I had heard a guy outside clear his throat. This is weird because our house is up a slope, behind trees and on the opposite side of the road with a footpath. We also have no neighbors, so nobody should have been around, especially at 8:30 p.m. at night. I sent my mother a text who was watching TV down the other end of the house. My bedroom is in the front closest to the road. I told her that I heard some guy clear his throat oddly close to the house. She then went and got my father from the bathroom. They both stepped out the back door and around the side of the house, looking down towards the front, and they saw some guy slip down the slope underneath the low trees at the front. My father ran back inside, got a torch, and walked down the street looking around the area, but he couldn't see anyone. He had asked a couple walking a dog if they'd seen anyone, but they just said no. I knew that whoever it was had to have been hiding, because he wouldn't have made it up or down the street without being seen. My boyfriend was due home in about 10 minutes, so I called him and I told him to look out for anyone walking up the street, probably in black clothes. When my boyfriend got home, he told me that there was a well-dressed guy in a black button-up shirt, suit pants, dress shoes, and he also had a briefcase walking up the street. I was a little suspicious, and I had joked around that he's probably got his breaking-in supplies in the case. But I didn't think much of it until days later, when the lady said that the guy that followed and approached her was well-dressed, and I'm genuinely wondering if it's the same person. My mother has spoken to her, and they believe it's the same guy based on the description. The police are currently looking into it and scoping out our neighborhood every night. I'm not really sure if it was the same guy outside our house that stalked this lady or tried doing God knows what to my mother, but I have a bad feeling that it is. There's a rumor going around that another lady was approached too. I don't know what intentions this guy has, kidnapping if I had to guess, but I'm absolutely terrified knowing that there's someone hanging around with some seriously bad intentions, and I really wonder if there's someone in the back of his van waiting to pounce too. The ironic thing is that my father was going to put in our dash cams that same afternoon before my mother went to work, but he couldn't have been bothered. It would have caught everything that happened had he have done it. I'm a socially anxious person, and now I'll be living in a lot more fear until this guy's caught, and I really hope he's caught soon. I'm really bad at telling stories, but I'll try to make sense. This happened over 3 weeks ago, and I live in downtown LA. I like to shop at the Burlington that's in Broadway Street, and I usually shop in the mornings, but I decided to go in the afternoon around 4 p.m. Anyways, I was there trying on some clothes, and I see a group of guys walking my way trying on some shoes. Now, I like to smile at people, to show kindness. Well, I then got their attention, and I heard them speaking in Russian. I'm half Russian, half Mexican myself, so I understand Russian. Usually people get confused since I'm quite tan and have brown hair and gray eyes, and they assume I'm either Middle Eastern or Egyptian. Anywho, I like to smile at people to show kindness, so I smiled at one of the guys, and we'll call him Guy 1, and he smiled back at me. I'm only 18, and I won't lie, I was quite attracted to the guy who smiled back at me. We kept staring back at each other until they left. I spent about 30 more minutes there at the store before then heading out, until guy number 1 approached me and then said, "Hey, how are you?" Me being young and finding this guy attractive, I decided to make more conversation with this guy. Also, he had a thick Russian accent. Right there at the moment, I decided to tell him that I understand, and I also speak Russian, but he spoke over me, and this was the conversation. "Hey, I saw you at the store a while ago, and my friends and I think you're beautiful, and we wanted to talk to you." I reply back with, "Yeah, I noticed you 3 at the store as well while I was getting ready to try on some clothes." "Well, me and my friend waited for you to tell if you wanted to go out for some drinks. Wanna go?" he said. I didn't know whether to say yes or no, but I ended up saying yes since I wanted to keep talking to this guy. I forgot to mention that it was also very dark outside at this point, and that there wasn't any more people really out. When we walked to the guy's car, he had a black car with black tinted windows. While I was looking at the other guys, he had helped me get in the car, and he sat very close to me. Well, the 2 guys in the front then began speaking Russian to the guy who sat next to me. I pretended not to know what they were saying and just ignored it by putting on my headphones and pretending to listen to music. When I then heard, this was what guy number 2 said. "What exactly are we going to do with her after we drop her off somewhere?" My body felt as if my own soul left it right away. I didn't understand exactly what he meant by somewhere. Then guy number 3 then said, "I think we should just do what we really want to do." At this point I wanted to cry, but I had held back my tears until guy number 1 then said, "My friends and I actually feel like going out to eat somewhere far away. Are you okay with that?" To which I then quietly replied back with, I don't think it's a good idea, and I think I want to go home." Well, this is when guy number 1 shows his true colors. He then said to me, "You aren't going anywhere. What kind of stupid idiot would get inside a car with 3 guys that she doesn't even know?" They all started laughing at me, and I ended up crying. They then continued driving, with the guy next to me trying to take my phone away and throw it outside the window. I tried kicking the windows, but the guy got on top of me. That was the moment where I prayed to stay alive, and I really thought that my life was over. I thought about everyone, my family, my friends, everything. It was just overall a horrible feeling, not knowing what was going to happen to me. I managed to actually get one of the doors unlocked, and I was able to jump out of the car with it still going. All I remember was getting up, and I just started running. I just ran and ran, and I didn't stop. I then ran inside of a store, and I asked them to call the cops. Cops eventually arrived, and I explained everything that happened to the cops. I explained how there were Russian men who took me and wouldn't let me out of the car until I escaped. I ended up filing a report with the police with as little info as I had, but to my knowledge, those same Russian men haven't been caught to this day, nor have I seen them around town. I'm so lucky that I managed to get away, and I'm so glad I survived. So now that the case is over, I can talk about it freely. I figured I would share my story of the time I got kidnapped. This happened in 2021. I was 20 at the time, and I had just gotten off work around 11 p.m., and I went straight home to get ready to go out and meet my friend at the strip club. He messaged me via Facebook Messenger to hang out and smoke, and I told him that I was meeting a friend and didn't want to hang out. So he offered to drive me to and from the strip club. Well, around 12:30 a.m., he came to pick me up, and he said he had to dump some garbage first. He had a couch on the back of the pickup truck bed, which I assumed was the garbage he was talking about. He said that he had made us margaritas, but I told him I didn't want to drink until I got to my destination, so we ended up just smoking marijuana on the way to dump the couch. It was about a 25 to 30 minute car ride to where he wanted to dump this couch, and by the time we made it to the destination, it was about 1:15 a.m. There was a logging road just off to the side of the highway that goes for miles. He pulled all the way down to the end and left the couch there, and then got back in the truck and started driving back towards the highway. But once we got halfway back to the highway, he then stopped and put his truck in park, then pulled out a pipe and started smoking more marijuana. After taking a hit, he turned his head to me and kind of just stared at me for a minute with a weird smirk on his face. Then all of a sudden, he almost looked like he wanted to jump at me, but had stopped himself in the moment with his hands in a motion like he was about to grab me. I got scared at this point, and I was frozen in shock, not knowing if it was a joke or not. I quickly realized that it was not a joke, and I opened my door like I was about to get out, and he did the same. I closed my door, and then he closed his too. We ended up playing door tag, and eventually he got tired of it and got out of the truck. Then he ran to my side. He opened my door, and he tried pulling me out by my legs. As I was trying to kick him, I had pulled my phone out to call the police. And of course, my Face ID didn't want to work in the moment, and he ended up snatching the phone right out of my hands. I kicked him hard enough in the chest, and he flew backwards, falling on his ass. I grabbed my purse and hopped out of the truck, and I then started running towards the highway. I kept looking back just to see how far behind me he was, and he gave me a head start before running after me. He then grabbed me by the back of my shoulders, forcefully throwing me into the ditch. I landed on my stomach with one leg straight out, with the other one bent at a weird angle. He then sat on top of my legs and butt, and was holding my left hand behind my back. I then screamed and begged for him to bring me home, that I wouldn't tell anyone. He got upset that I was screaming, and he tried suffocating me with his other hand, all the while still holding my left hand behind my back. I kept trying to pull his hands off of my face with my right hand, because it got to the point where I couldn't breathe. Finally, he let go of my face, and I turned my head around to see what he was doing. And to my surprise, I watched him pull zip ties out of his front jean pocket. He zip tied my hands behind my back and then tried forcefully pulling my panties off me. I had on a skirt and I was still lying on my stomach. I remember digging my knees into the ground so he couldn't get them off. He didn't. He then got up and started pacing. Then he started saying, "It shouldn't have happened this way. Just do what I say, okay?" I cried, telling him if he was going to do anything to me, then put me back in the truck. And he did. I'm not going to go into detail about this part of the story, but what I did notice was he pulled out a really small Ziploc baggie out of his jean pocket and then pulled out a condom. He took the condom out of the actual wrapper it came in and put it in a really small Ziploc bag, if that makes any sense. I asked him what it was for, and he then said, "It's for protection." After all that went down, he got back in the truck and he drove back to the highway and started driving around. Keep in mind, I'm still tied up. I made every excuse I could to get him to take them off of me, and he wouldn't. I asked for a cigarette, which I don't even smoke. He then lit one, smoked on it a bit, then held it up to my mouth saying, "I'll hold it for you." At this point, I thought to myself, what can I do to get myself out of this situation? I really thought I was going to die. I then started saying things like, You can be my sugar daddy. I'll pay to take us out to dinner tomorrow. If pussy's all you wanted from me, you could have just said that." He loved it so much, he started saying that he would put me on his life insurance policy so that when he dies, I can get the money. I eventually asked him again if he would take off the zip ties. They were on so tight it was cutting my circulation. He pulled to the side of the road, and he pulled out a mini pocket knife from his car keys, then cut them off of me. It took a few tries because of how tight they were, and he gave me my phone back. I had an Apple Watch on my wrist, and I asked him for it after noticing it wasn't on my wrist anymore, and he had this surprised look on his face. Then he said, "We need to go back and get it." He turned around and headed back to where all of that just happened at. I got so scared and thought to myself, yeah, this is it. I'm gonna die here tonight, and nobody will know until somebody finds my dead body. Once we got there, he told me to stay in the truck, and he got out and searched the ditch for my watch. He came back to the truck after about 5 minutes, but he said he couldn't find it, but that he would be back there in the morning to look when it's light outside. We got back on the highway and headed back to town. Once we got into town, he asked me, "What do you want to do now?" "Can you please bring me to my mom's house? I have to work in 4 hours and I'm tired." And he actually brought me to my mom's. Keep in mind it was 4:30 a.m. at this point. After getting to my mom's house, I had looked up his name on Google. He was actually on parole for first-degree murder. He had served 17.5 years in prison for murdering somebody for their life insurance policy. I'm 22 years old now, and I'm so thankful I got to see another day. I was subpoenaed to testify against him, and he was found guilty November 6, 2023 of all charges. As of now, he hasn't been sentenced yet. This was one of the most terrifying and traumatizing things that I ever went through. I wouldn't wish it on my own worst enemy. While this isn't the most scariest story, I was completely terrified. For some context, this happened in 2012. I'm a very petite lady, standing at 5'2", and I was about 90 or so pounds. It was during the summer, and I had just turned 13 some months before. I had nothing to do, so I decided to go to my grandma's. She lived about 3 miles away, and we had recently moved to our house. So I told my brothers where I was headed, and I was off. I didn't have a phone or iPod, so I just listened to the sounds of the city. About halfway, I was coming up on an intersection. As I was about to cross, I saw a white van pulling over next to the crosswalk about 3 feet away from me. This older guy, who had to be in his 30s or 40s with a thick accent that I still can't place, had leaned over and asked, "Hey there, do you need a ride?" I, being my cautious self, stopped in my steps and then said, "No thank you, I'm okay." The man then asked, "Are you sure? It's not a big deal. I can give you a ride wherever you're going." I once again said no thanks, and he asked me again, slightly aggravated with me, "Come on, I'll give you a ride." And again I said no thanks, I'll walk. To which he finally replied with, "Well, okay then." And he gave me a slightly creepy smile. Then he let me cross the street, and he turned down the street and then took a left down the next one. I looked at him turning down the street as I was finished crossing. I got really nervous, but I couldn't let him notice, so once he was gone, I started to jog to the next intersection. I told myself I'd fight if I had to. When I got to it, I saw him in his van about to go through the stop sign. It was as if he had just waited at the stop sign waiting to see me again. I looked at him, and I walked fairly fast through that intersection. He gave me a little smile and then slightly waved at me. He went straight through the stop sign, following on the street parallel to the very busy one that I was walking down. I again jogged to the next intersection, and there he was yet again. He again gave me a small smile and a slight wave. His smile was off-putting. It was like he was thinking of what he wanted to do to me. Once again after crossing, he went straight and I jogged to the next intersection, making sure that he didn't see me jogging. This time, instead of going straight, he turned left right towards me. He smiled, and he then said something to which I can't even remember now, but he gave me this look. It was like he was mad, but not because he didn't get me to come in, but that now he had to find someone else to get into his van so he could do God knows what to. The man then turned right, and I crossed the street. I saw him go straight, so I jogged to the next street and turned right. Passing by my old elementary school, I took the longer way to my grandma's with more turns. When I finally got there, she could actually see the worry and fear on my face and asked me what was wrong. I told her, and when it was time to go, she actually drove me home this time. I told my mom as well, and my grandma talked to her about it too. After that, she didn't let me go anywhere by myself, and the next time I wanted to go to my grandma's, 4 of my brothers walked with me, along with my older brother's friend who also lived with us. I never saw the creepy man or his van ever again. I also never heard of a girl getting kidnapped in that area. I've always hoped that he never gave someone else a ride. I often feel guilty that we didn't report it though. Even though I got a good look at him multiple times, I never remembered his face, just his voice. That gruff, off-toned voice. He tried to sound kind and helpful, but you could tell that he wanted to be mean, to yell at me, and to get me to do God only knows what. Thank God he didn't succeed. At the time this took place, I was 35. I'm a short 4'11" female on the curvy side. I used to think online dating was harmless. I had this idea that there was a verification process. There's not. And anyways, I got on that popular fish app and tried my luck apparently. A few dozen unimpressive messages later, I was ready to ditch it and just go out with friends, when a man who could put more than one word or vulgar picture together wrote me. He caught my attention, so we talked for a few days, and I agreed to texting, thinking worst case I'll just block him if he started to be creepy. After about 3 weeks, I agreed to dinner. Here's when everything gets messed up. I gave him my address because he said he would like to pick me up, instead of agreeing to meet me at the restaurant. When I was getting ready, my entire body was giving off don't go vibes. I didn't feel comfortable. My stomach was in all kinds of knots. I took it as being nervous about meeting someone like this. Nope, my body was trying to warn me. When I went to the door, I was actually breaking out in goosebumps. I just pushed all of it down, and we went to dinner. Dinner was fine, but my fight or flight was in high gear. I ended up making an excuse to leave early. We were leaving the restaurant, and he opened my door as I crossed in front of him, and he actually tased me. I fell forward towards his truck, and he just pushed me into the seat, then closed the door. Dazed, I tried to sit up. Something had hit me hard in the back of my head. The next thing I remember is going up the stairs. The man had tied me to his bed, and he tased me anytime I put up a fight. He put me in his bathroom and then cuffed me to the bar next to the tub. He held me captive for 8 days, repeatedly assaulting me, doing what he wanted, and then forcing me to eat or drink. It was when he decided to move me to his cabin that I knew it was my only chance to get away. I tried to obey him, or at least let him think that so that he wouldn't tase me again. I was allowed to wear a shirt and be cuffed in the front. Getting in the truck, I waited for my chance, and when I saw a cop at the stop sign, I took it. I jumped from the truck and I ran across the street to him. I ran to the cop, who was horrified from my expression. I then collapsed right at his feet. They ended up catching him, and I spent 2 weeks in the hospital. But here's the truly terrifying part. You're not gonna fucking believe this shit, but my kidnapper was actually a cop. He was on the same force as the one who saved me. I honestly left a lot out to spare myself, but how many women went to his cabin? How many came back? As you can all imagine, there was indeed a trial, and this cop got sent away for a very long time. I'm not going to reveal any identifiable facts about the case, as I don't want anyone finding out who I am or who the man was. I want to stay anonymous. But this just goes to show that you can never truly trust anyone, even the ones in uniform that are supposed to protect us. I have 2 stories about how I almost got kidnapped. These are 2 separate stories that are not related to one another. Story 1 happened when I was about 12 or 13. My dad and I and our brothers went to a soccer game. Here's a description of the layout. There were several soccer fields, and a few hundred feet away was a playground. My dad was watching the game, and I chose to go play on the playground alone. Now, no one was at the playground, so I sat at the top of the slide and I was just looking around bored. Well, behind me was a little opening for the jungle bars. As I was sitting up there, I had heard rocks crunching behind me. So I turned around and there was a grown man. The man had opened his arms and tried to grab me. But luckily I slid down the slide just in time and I managed to get away. I ran all the way to my dad, not looking back until I got to him. I actually didn't even tell my dad what happened, because I guess I thought I would get in trouble. But to all of those listening to this, please do tell someone if something like this ever happens to you. It's very important that you tell an adult so that they can properly help you and also save someone else. Now, story 2. Well, that one happened when I was 17. My mom does cleaning for some apartment buildings, and I had decided to help her for some extra cash. 2 of the buildings are on the same road, so I was walking to one building from the other, and I noticed a man staring at me. I tried to look away, but he just kept staring. I quickly typed in the code to get into the building, and I tried to close the door really fast, but he managed to get in right behind me. This guy was literally walking right on my heel. I could literally feel him behind me, so I decided to not take the elevator. I instead ran down the stairs, and there was a man walking up the stairs. I ran right into him, but for some reason I didn't tell him about the situation. I just quickly apologized and kept running, and of course the man chasing me ran into him too. I opened the door to the apartment units on that floor, and I then ran to the elevators. Right as the doors were closing, I saw him open the door to the units and start to run to me, but the doors closed right on time. I never saw the man again after this, but I'm so incredibly grateful for the man walking up the stairs that distracted the man chasing me right in time for me to enter the elevator. I don't know if he had a feeling I was getting chased, but I did hear him talking to the guy as I was running. That's the end of my story. I just want to say stay safe, everyone. And again, please tell an adult if something like this ever happens to you. My name is Wendy. The story takes place when I was 13 years old. I'm now 39. My family and I lived out in the country in Kentucky. At the time, my siblings and I were homeschooled. Our teacher and her family lived like a mile down the road from us. My siblings and I would walk to school together and home together. Well, one day after our homeschooling sessions, my sister and brothers decided to stay afterwards to play basketball with the teacher's son, so I was walking home alone. I'm halfway home when an old loud car comes up beside me. A man then rolls down his window, asking if I needed a ride. I say no, that I live right there, pointing at my house. The man kept trying to get me in his car, but I just said no. I continued on my walk, and the man slowly pulls up yet again, and starts to open his door to get out. I said no, looking at my house, seeing my mom standing at the front door and then coming out into the porch when she then realized what was about to take place. The man then quickly shut his door and sped down the road. Needless to say, I ran the rest of the way home. After that, my mom would never let me walk home alone. After this took place, it had really scarred me. For years, I would have dreams that someone was trying to kill me or pull a gun out on me. I had these dreams until I was in my early 20s. Just thinking about what that man's intentions were made me so sick. I'm now married with 4 children, and I tell them this story every time they ask to walk somewhere, and it doesn't even seem to faze them. I always try and tell them that there are really cruel people out there in this world, and to not easily trust people, especially if they don't know them. It's a very dark world out there, and we've got to do our best to guide our children and keep them safe. I'm a 32-year-old woman, but I often think about an event that took place in my childhood that could have ended extremely badly. When I was around 3 years old, my biological father, who's no longer in my life, took me skiing for some reason. I don't understand the logic of taking a toddler to the high slopes, but he often got me into sticky situations. Anyway, as a child, you're often in your own little dream world. You don't necessarily see danger, and your main priorities tend to be playing in meal times, or just simply seeing what looks fun, without any notion of consequences. I have, much later in my life than most, been diagnosed as autistic, which makes a person more susceptible to seeing others at face value and not bad. At one point on this trip, my dad and I were out in the snow, and I believe walking back from the slopes to the nearest cabin to warm up by the fire. But I was so young I had no idea where we were, and the ski slopes all blended together. We were walking for what felt like over an hour and in the snow with heavy ski boots on. I was over it, and I wasn't paying attention to anything but craving warmth and to sit down. I had been holding my dad's hand, so we stayed together as we trekked. Obviously, he didn't want me to stray off, but at some point he must have let go of my hand, and I kept on walking forward. I don't know why he did that, if he was asking someone on the slope for directions to the cabin or what had occurred. And as a young kid, I just didn't notice. I remember I was walking in the same direction, and I had my hand taken yet again. I simply assumed that it was my dad. The hand felt big and the same as his. I just kept on. I was stuck in my own world, daydreaming away. Suddenly, I sort of paused my steps going forward. It was so quiet around me, and I was noticing less and less people and trees coming up. My dad usually isn't that quiet, and I hadn't been near these particular trees. I looked to my left, and I saw the man holding my hand and walking into this isolated area of the ski slopes was not my dad. He was a tall man. My memory is hazy, but I remembered he smiled down at me and said nothing. He didn't tell me who he was. He didn't say where my dad had gone to or where we were walking to. He just smiled down at me and gently squeezed my hand, leading me onward. I knew something was not making sense. He isn't even scary looking. In fact, I remember even thinking as a kid, who's this tall redhead holding my hand? It looks so nice. I didn't feel any fear. I almost think that I was happy to be rid of my dad, hoping this man would actually take me somewhere warm. He remained firm in holding my hand and leading me away from everything, until I heard from behind me a distant yell, and I then recognized it as my dad's voice, though it all felt like I was in a daze. He came up to me running and scooped me up quickly. He wasn't mad at me or anything, but it seemed like he was acting extremely quickly. My memory is very hazy at this point, but the eerie part of all this was the quiet. People weren't anywhere. No noises from animals. Nothing but the slight wind. I don't know if my dad talked to the man or just took me and ran quickly out of there to avoid danger himself. My dad is around 5'11", but this man was easily 6'6". I almost wonder if not only was my dad concerned for his own safety, but if that man was just something more than just a man. My dad never talked about that day with anyone. I remember that night in the cabin that he wouldn't let me leave his side because I couldn't sleep, and he also kept playing with his light-up watch. I wonder often as the years pass what exactly that man was doing, and why I don't remember him saying anything or explaining himself at all. Normally, kidnappers at least attempt to weave a lie to lure a child with them, but this man just smiled and walked with me. It gives me chills to this day. I think my dad never talked about it because he thought people would judge him as a reckless parent, or maybe he thought that man was terrifying himself. I'll never know because he doesn't want to be in my life now, but if I ever see my dad again, I might ask him his perspective of that day at the ski slopes. I hope that tall man never did anything to any other child, but my gut feeling says that he probably had extremely sinister intent. This happened near the end of 2023 when I was temporarily homeless. I'm a 20-year-old female and I'm visually impaired, so that just made this entire experience even more scarier to me. I'll give a little backstory as to why I was homeless. So I used to be in the foster care system for a long time, and ever since I aged out at 18, I've really struggled trying to find somewhere to truly settle down at. After bouncing around from place to place, I ended up leaving a guardian's care since she was stealing my money and personal belongings. I entered a housing program specific to my city, and I moved into a rent-free apartment for their 6-month program to get back on my feet. Long story short, I got kicked out for not doing good enough, so I became homeless. I resided in the worst possible place to be homeless in my city. So there were a lot of druggies, assaults in all forms, alcoholics, and psychopaths. I have countless stories from just the 3 months I was homeless, but this one was by far the scariest. This happened about a month before I found housing. I was leaving a little church building where a pastor brought Chick-fil-A for the homeless people, and after getting my chicken sandwich, I had bumped into a guy I'd run into a few times before. Let's call him R. R asked me how I was doing, and I told him I was doing okay. He asked me if I wanted to get some ice cream with him. Since it was hot outside, despite it being October, I stupidly agreed. I had safety measures in place along with legal self-defense weapons, so I was fairly confident I could get out of any potential situation. I know, pretty arrogant of me. Anyway, I got in the front seat and he started driving. He knew I was visually impaired, so he started telling me which ways he was turning and what direction we were going. North, south, east, west, yada yada. I ended up deciding that I didn't want ice cream, so he suggested a McDonald's that was inside of a JPS, which is a 10 or 11 floor building with a hospital, mental hospital, and a lot of other random places, including a McDonald's inside of it. Our parallel parked on the side of the road, and we got out. I held onto his elbow, which is something blind people do so they don't trip or fall. It's called sighted guide. We walked into the JPS, and I needed to use the bathroom. So he showed me where the women's bathroom was, and I did my thing, then came out a few minutes later. I didn't see him, and I started walking a little, and then the dude jump scared me. I laughed, and then we walked into the McDonald's, with him then asking me what I wanted. I said Dr. Pepper since it's my favorite soda. He asked if that was it, and I said yes. So he ordered 2 Dr. Peppers, and we stood off to the side and waited for our drinks. About a minute later we got them, and then we sat down at a booth. He started talking about life, his ex-wife, and sex. Something I forgot to mention is he constantly brought up sex when he was driving us to the JPS. He'd say stuff like, you know, if you said something like R lay down or R pull down your pants, I'd be like, no, I barely know you, which I immediately knew was some sort of weird manipulation tactic. I ignored it though because I was kind of a foodie, so I was really just in it for the soda. Anyway, As he keeps bringing up sex, I had looked at the time on my phone, which did have service that I was able to pay with my SSI, and I noticed that the shelter I stayed around was about to serve lunch. So I told R that I was ready to go back because I didn't want to miss lunch. He said that he could buy me lunch, but I rebutted and said that I didn't want to miss chapel, which was basically a church service that they do every day before lunch. R reluctantly agreed, and we headed back out to his giant SUV. I got back in the passenger seat, and this is where things get a little more intense. He started driving, and yep, you guessed it, he started talking about sex again. I groaned internally, and I was getting pretty frustrated with him. He moved his right hand while he talked, occasionally and accidentally hitting my breast. I say accidentally in quotations. I swatted his hand every time so he accidentally didn't lower. He grabbed my upper thigh, more on the inside, and I tensed up, grabbing his wrist and moving his hand away from me. Mind you, he's still talking about sex. So I flat out asked him, R, do you want to have sex with me? He immediately got defensive and then said, What? No, I'm just talking. I barely know you. I said with extreme skepticism, and he fell silent for a bit. Obviously, I wasn't going to do anything like that with him. I just wanted to see his reaction. He started talking again, but was asking questions like if I was a virgin or did I have a boyfriend and whatnot. I said no and that I was into girls, that I'm bisexual, and I then empathized that I preferred girls. I knew that wouldn't deter him by much, but it is the truth. He kept stalling on bringing me back, and I was starting to grow increasingly frustrated. I started urging him impatiently to take me back because I didn't want to miss lunch. I also get motion sickness, so I was also trying not to puke everywhere. Eventually, he started driving me back to the shelter, but I know he wanted to take me somewhere else. As we pulled up to a little pull-in spot near the shelter, he full-on grabbed my breasts and I swatted his hands away, then reaching into my pocket, grabbing my stun gun. I stunned him and then jumped out of the car, leaving my Dr. Pepper that I barely drank behind and then running into the shelter. I was frantic, and several homeless women asked me if I was okay, but I said I was fine. They didn't believe me, but I didn't care. No one would have really done anything anyway, since the stuff happened on the street all the time. Luckily for me, I'm now renting my own apartment, and I couldn't be happier. If you take anything away from this, it's don't make stupid decisions like I did, whether you think you can handle it or not. You never know what anyone's capable of, and I'm really glad I was able to convince them to bring me back. Make sure that you always have safety plans in place, and keep close friends and family in on them. I live in the Southwest United States in a major city that's known for human trafficking. I'm 25 years old, and I have a wife and 2 toddlers, both boys. One day, my wife and I decided to go to a Turkish restaurant that my coworker recommended in the downtown area. This particular restaurant was tucked away behind some trees, and it had a sketchy alley behind it, but the restaurant itself was really nice, so I didn't think anything of it. We were greeted by the owner, who was very polite and welcoming, and he set us outside. My wife sat with her back facing the front of the restaurant, which is a detail that'll make more sense later on. I was facing the restaurant with our kids between us. We ordered our food, and everything was going well until the owner brought out our food. He seemed to be looking at our kids an awful lot, and he then touched their heads and backs, saying, "Those are some cute kids." This made me uncomfortable, but I dismissed it. Once we started eating, I could see the owner standing at the front entrance just mad-dogging me with this piercing stare, along with 2 of his employees. After some time, one of the employees picks up his phone and starts talking to someone in a different language and was staring right at me the entire time. At this point, I began to worry. I have never gotten this feeling of paranoia from anyone around my kids. I really felt like they were planning to take my kids, and if they decided to pull up to the restaurant from the back alley, they could snatch them in seconds. I then told my wife to take the kids to the car, but she complained that they'd be too heavy and fight her since they're toddlers. I then told her to ask for the check and to just leave ASAP. She seemed puzzled but cooperated. As soon as I got up to leave, the owner damn near ran out insisting that we order dessert. This made me livid. I firmly declined with a no, and of course this all happens the one day that I forget to bring my firearm. I quickly rushed my kids to the car while my wife paid the bill and then followed shortly after. I then explained to her that I got a gut feeling that they wanted to take our children, and we sped out of the downtown area. Maybe I was being paranoid, but that wasn't a risk I was going to take with my family. Just remember, to all the parents with kids out there, trust your gut when it comes to anyone you think wants to harm your children or your family. Stay safe. My name is Tanya, and I'm 46 years old. I was born in Tucson, Arizona. I was about 8 years old, so it was in the 80s. Different times back then, lots of predators. So my family, which was my mom, dad, and older brother who's 5 years older than me, were doing our monthly shopping at the Price Club. Shout out to those who know. So then we all entered the store together. I had long golden blonde hair and blue eyes. My dad is a big guy, okay, like 6'3". My mom was 5'6", so not too short. Anyhow, we split up. My dad and brother go one way, and my mom and I go the other. So the aisles in this huge building were wide and long. So anyway, my mom and I are looking at towels and other things, and I glanced over to the next aisle and I saw clocks. So I asked my mom if I can go play at the clocks, and they're just right there, and I point them out. She says yes, but if she calls me that I better answer her. I agree, and I then skip away to the next aisle. I'm looking at all the clocks, and all of a sudden a man has his hand over my mouth, and he then starts smelling my hair, then whispering into my ear, "Oh, you're a very pretty girl. I can give you lots of money if you just come with me." I'm crying and I'm trying to bite scream. Then, like the angel she was and my hero, my mom just appears and starts beating the shit out of this man, screaming. She was kicking his ass. He lets go of me and then runs. I run into my mom's arms and I just cry and cry. That experience changed me. So my mom scoops me up and starts running to tell someone to stop that man. Unfortunately, he got away. I pray that he never tried that again to another innocent child. I never let go of my mom's hand ever again, and I always thanked her for that. I lost my beautiful sweet mother in February of 2013. She was and will always be my hero. I miss her more and more every day. I know if there's a heaven, she's there. I try to live life like she taught me. That's how I honor her. And I thank you once again, Mom, for saving me from those nightmarish things. I will always be more grateful for you on that scary day. Rest in peace, Angel. I only hope that we'll meet again one day. When I was a young child, my mom's old car would always have problems because it was actually my grandpa's. It was a platinum metallic grayish blue color. One day my mother, my sister, and I had to go to Goodyear to get new tires or something, but when she got out of the car and went into the store, she took a bit too long. Since I was a baby or toddler, I can't fully remember what happened, but my sister apparently saw a man approaching our vehicle. My sister is agoraphobic, means she doesn't really like being around people. She tried to ignore the man, but she kept seeing him around the car. She started getting suspicious of the man, obviously because he was surrounding our car, weirdly with little to no reason, and he didn't seem to work at the Goodyear. No uniform or anything. That's when he then tried opening the doors to the car. My sister was horrified that he would try to steal me or even try to assault us both, and luckily it's one of our anxious habits to always lock the doors even when parked. He didn't seem to have a weapon, so that was a relief but still anxiety-inducing. The man then seemed to get the picture that he couldn't rob us or do anything, so he simply just went away. The man was never identified, and we still don't know what he wanted from us or what he wanted to do to us. Luckily, my mom came out, and my sister told her everything that happened. This is a message to everyone that has children or anyone staying in their car without a phone or contact with the driver while running errands. Always keep your doors locked and your windows rolled up. The story takes place around 1998. I live in the town of North Glen, Colorado. At the time, I was 9 years old, and it was still pretty underdeveloped there. The school buses weren't allowed to go down the street that I lived on because of specific zoning, so the school bus would let us off at the start of a couple of blocks away from where the complex started. So to give you a better picture, I would get off the bus, and to the left of me was a big building that used to be a tech company of some sort. I can't remember which company it was, but they had closed down, so the parking lot was always empty. To the right of me was a big field, and about a block away from the tech company was the beginning of my apartment complex. I would walk through this parking lot daily after I got off the bus to go home. Often I got out of school before my sister did because she was in middle school and I was in elementary. This was a time obviously before we had cell phones. These were the good old days with landlines. I had felt relatively safe and previously had never had anything to worry about. One day I got off the school bus and I was walking to my complex. There were a few other children that were walking and talking together, and I was kind of a loner and I didn't really have any friends in the complex, so I often walked by myself. I had noticed that there was a truck parked in the parking lot. There was also a guy sitting in this truck. I didn't really think anything of it and just continued walking home. Well, about a week or so of seeing this truck, I began to notice the man that was inside the truck was looking at me every time I walked past him to go home. He never parked close enough to where I was going for me to really be concerned though. I started to notice after some time that he was starting to park closer to where I would walk, so I started walking partially in the field to head home. He never got out of his truck, but just watched me. I didn't think there was anything to alert my mom about because, well, like I said, he had never gotten out of his truck. He was just sitting there. It was around April, about 2 months after this man was seen in the parking lot watching me, that things had changed. I got off the school bus as usual, and I started my trip home. This time the man was not only parked in the parking lot, but he was standing outside his truck. I walked partially in the field like I had started doing, and I stopped dead in my tracks when I then noticed that he was then motioning for me to come over to him. Mind you, for a 9-year-old kid, I was pretty small. I looked a lot younger than 9. I could have easily passed for being 5 or 6. I just stood there staring at him as he was then motioning for me to come over to him. I was wondering why a grown-up would want to talk to a child. My mom always taught me not to talk to strangers or ever approach strange vehicles. I didn't see any of the other children that got off the school bus with me, and I assumed they had already made it home. When he realized I wasn't going to come to him, he started walking towards me. Pretty much out of nowhere, another kid from my school came up to me, noticing that this guy was really weird and coming towards me, then saying, "There you are! I was waiting for you!" He and I just walked the rest of the way to the apartment complex together before then parting ways. Thinking back on it, I think that he had planned to kidnap me. And if it weren't for that kid, I would have gotten kidnapped for sure, and I probably would have never been seen again. After that incident, the truck was never seen again. I don't know who this kid was, but I'm so thankful that he noticed something was wrong and came over to me like he did. And if by the off chance that kid also listens to Southern Cannibal, I just want to say thank you for protecting me the way that you did. You could have very well saved my life, and I'm very glad we didn't have to find out. I did talk to my mom about this years later, and she truly believes that if it weren't for that kid, she would have never seen me again. We're both very thankful for him. Be safe out there, everyone. Seriously. When I was a young kid, I almost got kidnapped. I was maybe 11 years old and it was summertime, and I had just finished elementary school. My dad took me to his friend's house, who we'll call Mike. Mike had a girlfriend and a kid of their own. We'll call the girlfriend Sherry. That's why I was brought there. I spent most of my summer days there since they didn't actually live that far from me and it was a quick 5-minute drive. And why not? They had a pool outside and they let me go in it whenever I wanted. So on the 4th of July, Sherry had offered to do my makeup. And as a little girl, I was so excited and I really wanted to get it done. There was also going to be a party at my house, so why not get dressed up? We get to her house and it's just us there, and there were no other kids. And I chose not to worry because I thought we wouldn't be there for long anyways. She did my makeup and it was starting to get dark, and when she was finished, she kept delaying on leaving to take me home. My dad ended up coming to pick me up because he felt like I was there for far too long. Well, a few days later, Sherry stops by and offers to take me to Wendy's, which is also not very far from me. I get excited and say yes, and I ask if we can bring my dog. She said yes, and she also had her dog as well. When we get outside, she makes me give her my dog, and I can hold her dog. I was kind of upset, but whatever. So anyways, we're almost at Wendy's, and she's trying to make me tie my dog outside, but it was so busy and I wasn't going to leave my dog outside for food. She says okay, but she says that she forgot her card at home, so we had to go back there and then we could come back. We started walking there, and I start to feel really uncomfortable. We're just a few blocks away, and I now start to totally freak out, and I wanted to call my mom. All I had was an Obama phone, which, if you're not sure what that is, it was a tiny phone with buttons and a tiny square screen. For some reason, my phone wasn't working, and I was asking her if I could call my mom on her phone. And for some reason, she actually said yes. So I call my mom and tell her what's going on, and that she was taking me home, but that I didn't want to go. So she sends my dad. While he's on the way, Sherry is visibly angry with me, and she's calling me a stupid bitch and that she hated me. My dad gets there and totally cusses her out and then drives me back home. So turns out a few weeks later, I found out that she had totally gone crazy and that her boyfriend had left her and CPS took her kids away from her. And I guess she was trying to replace them with me, so she targeted me. Yeah, pretty damn crazy if you ask me. Before I start this story, I should say that I'm a young girl that lives along a highway. I had driven to a nearby town to meet my mom and dad for something, leaving my 2 younger siblings at home. Once we had finished our business in town, I left to go home and my parents stayed in the town. I'm a fairly new driver, so my mom wanted to guide me through the busy intersection before she turned back around. The moment she had turned off the road, a white stereotypical kidnapper van had pulled behind me. The van was nearly bumper to bumper with me and had followed me for about 30 minutes, but you never think that someone is about to kidnap you. So, not wanting to overact, I had told myself that the van likely was just coincidentally going the same way. Stupid, I know. I had my suspicions, but it was mostly me just joking around with myself about the busted up van being a kidnapper van. Eventually, I get to my house and turn off the highway while looking into my rearview mirror to see if he had kept going. I had truly expected him to keep going. So when he turned into my driveway behind me, my blood ran cold. I immediately called my mother in a blind panic. Instead of pulling up to the concrete slab beside my house, I had parked on the gravel in my yard where my dad parks his work truck, which was thankfully gone since he was driving it. The man parked behind me and got out of the vehicle. My mom was panicking and demanding that I do not get out of the vehicle. The man started gesturing at me to be quiet and get out of my car while walking closer. He was a white man with greasy brown hair. He was very skinny, and his eyes had the glazed look of someone who wasn't high but had a history with drugs. I eventually hit my gas and pulled around my yard back towards the road, only to see him following me in the rearview mirror. I had turned left onto the highway, and he turned right, flying down the road away from my home. My dad then called me, and he told me to go somewhere public and check my vehicle. I did, but nothing was wrong with it. The part that scares me the most is if my father's vehicle had been in its usual spot, I wouldn't have been able to get out. I would have parked at the house, which would have left me trapped, which I later learned the door was locked. So I would have tried to run for my house only to be locked out with a creepy man in a dingy van. The pure dread I felt when he turned behind me into the driveway will never leave me for as long as I live. I still cannot believe that that happened. When I was an 8th grader in middle school, I had a best friend at the time, and she would always hang out with me at my house. Well, on Halloween, she came over, and we were supposed to watch scary movies and eat snacks, but she suggested we do a little trick-or-treating around the neighborhood. I agreed and we went, but after, we had decided to go to one more neighborhood on top of a small hill by my house. It was less than a mile away, so I texted my mom saying we're walking to the neighborhood on top, and then we'll be back right after. She agreed, so we went. At the 4th house, people were outside. It was a nice family. My friend and I decided after this house we'll go to 2 more and then start heading home. Most people weren't home, so 4 houses down from the families, a black car pulls up beside me and my friend. It's a man and he's asking us for directions. My friend and I just look at each other, both of us having this scared look. Excuse me? I say, to which the man repeats, I need directions somewhere. To which my friend then says, I'm sorry, sir, but we can't help you. And the man then says back, Get in, now. My friend and I back up quickly from the sidewalk, and she takes my hand, running the opposite way of his car towards the family's house. They were going inside when we got there, and I then said, There's a man in that black car telling us to go with him, but we don't know him. The lady stands in front of us guarding us, and her husband runs after the car, but he got away. They told us they would report the incident, and if our parents could come get us, they would go talk to them about getting the police involved. But instead of my family being worried and scared, they were actually mad at me, and they told me to tell the lady to not call the cops and that we're fine. I do, and she says okay while giving us a hug. Her husband ended up dropping us off at my house again, and I remember just going into the bathroom with my friend and crying on her shoulders while she hugged me. A few weeks later, I was walking home from school alone, and right as I got into my neighborhood, I saw a black car turn in, and he pulls up beside me, then saying, Hey sweetheart, you want some candy? And it's the same fucking man from Halloween. I'm just shook at this point, standing there thinking this is really gonna happen again. Then he says, Come here, baby. You want to give me some head? Instantly, I felt disgusted, and my flight kicked in, so I ran home telling my mom. I forgot what she said specifically, but in conclusion, my family basically said that I just needed to be more careful and watch my surroundings, like it was my fault. Last year, I ended up getting close to my Native American youth advisor, and I told her what happened that Halloween, and she actually reported it. I haven't seen the guy since, but now I'm a junior in high school, and whenever I think back to that time, I feel nothing but anger. So to the guy who tried to kidnap me twice, fuck you, and you better hope I don't see your perverted nasty ass again. For some context, I'm a 20-year-old woman currently in my 3rd year at a UK university. I live about a 40-minute drive from my university, and because I'm disabled, I get special funding to cover taxis to and from the campus. There's recently been some issues with this, so instead of going with the usual taxi company, I've been taking Ubers. On the day of the story, I was forced to set off late to university because I had an appointment that morning that lasted longer than I thought it would. I'd booked an Uber and hoped that I'd get there a few minutes late at most. When the Uber arrived to pick me up, something seemed off. The car seemed a bit too nice to be an Uber, and when I got in after asking if it was for me, the driver barely even mumbled a hello. I dismissed it at first, thinking maybe he just wasn't the type to want to chat, and I didn't mind that. He asked me to confirm where I was going, so I told him the name of my university. He repeated it back to me to confirm, then we set off. The first thing I noticed as we were driving is that he didn't take the turns that drivers would usually take to head towards the university, and he seemed to glance over at the directions on his phone before ignoring them. For example, his phone told him to turn right, and he'd continue straight. Again, I dismissed my instincts telling me something was wrong, and I tried to tell myself that he drives for a job, so he might know different routes that I'm just not aware of. I stayed silent for a while, but the longer we drove, the more confused and anxious that I got. We were not going the right way, and we even passed a museum that I knew was in the opposite direction to where we were supposed to be going. At this point, I spoke up for the first time, and I nervously asked if we were still heading to the university that I told him. He insisted he would get me where I needed to be, and he even seemed angry that I'd questioned him. We continued driving, and I had started texting a friend, asking for her advice because I was starting to think that just something wasn't right here. I even sent her a text at some point telling her I'd seen a sign for a specific area, and she informed me I was getting further and further away from the university. At this point, I sent another friend that I trusted the driver's name, the license plate number, and anything else that I thought might help. I wasn't sure if I was being paranoid, but my gut was screaming that I needed to do something, and fast. I could feel my heart pumping fast and my breathing changing. He kept driving, and I then saw a sign for a whole nother city. I quickly grabbed my phone and started recording, showing the road signs nearby, trying to get a quick show of the driver's face before hiding my phone in my lap and starting to talk. I tried to be as assertive as possible, and I told the driver that I knew we were in the wrong place, and that I'd even send his details and our location to a friend of mine who would be contacting someone if she stopped hearing from me at any point before I reached the university. This technically wasn't true because my friend hadn't even replied to my message, but it seemed to work. I heard the driver say something under his breath that almost sounded like a swear word, but he seemed to start following his phone's directions after this. I ended up arriving to my university around 20 minutes late, as the detour added time to my estimated arrival time. As I was getting out of the Uber, the driver had tried to argue that he had taken me the wrong way because he thought I was going to a different university. I knew this didn't make any sense. His phone told him where I was going, and I had told him repeatedly as well. I shook my head, grabbed my bag, and walked as quickly as I could to my classroom before then apologizing to my teacher. He told me to sit, and it was only when I found a place in the front that I realized my heart was still pounding and my eyes felt damp. I contacted Uber support about this incident, and all I got was a partial refund and a statement saying they take these things seriously. I don't know if the driver will ever face any proper consequences, but I don't think he should be allowed to continue offering rides to people. I know some people might hear this and think it's not that scary, or he might have just made an honest mistake. But when you're in that moment and your gut is screaming at you that you're in danger, it's very important that you listen to it. Yes, I eventually got to my destination safely, but I'll always question what would have happened if I didn't make sure my friend knew where I was. I guess the message of this story is to always listen to your gut, and that if you feel something is wrong, do not stay silent. Contact someone if you're afraid something might happen, and give them as much detail as you can. It could be the very thing that keeps you safe. This took place 4 to 5 years ago, right when I was 16 and right after Halloween. I was selling some stuff online on the Facebook Marketplace, and I got help from my mother. I'm not going to use any names or locations for private reasons. When someone had messaged me for a fog machine that I was getting rid of because I didn't need it anymore, I had gotten a new one for next year's Halloween. The account itself seemed alright. It had photos of fashion clothing, as well as other stuff that had to do with fashion. It seemed like an actual person and not some stranger running this account. I had sent them a message, asking when do they want to meet up. They said they could meet up now, and they could meet at Menards. If some of you guys don't know what Menards is, it's kind of like a Home Depot. It was quite a very big store. Reminder, it was around 9 to 10 at night, but I agreed, and my mother drove me out to Menards just to make sure things were good. He said he would be in a silver SUV. I'm not sure what manufacturer or model of the car, but I remember that it was a silver SUV. This happened years ago, and I can't really remember what car he was in. It took around 10 minutes to get there. It was a pretty short drive, and as we drove, he asked if we were almost there. I messaged him saying we were almost there. We see the storefront and we pull into the parking lot. I scan the entire parking lot, and I immediately see his vehicle sitting in between two diesels that had trailers. There was a truck stop or whatever it's called where they fill up their diesels and sleep for the night right by Menards. There was not really good lighting from the streetlights either that night, and he was completely away from the front entrance of the store. I picked up on this as a red flag immediately. I have high paranoia, so this definitely made my blood rush a little bit. Where he was parked was not normal for a meetup for an item that was on sale. It was completely away from any other people. I messaged him saying if we could meet up in the front of the Menards store, as I thought this was more safe. He completely ignored the messages because we gave him like 5 minutes to answer or we were leaving. It was well over 5 minutes now, and we say fuck it and leave. We could still see him sitting in between those two diesels. The car's lights were all off, making it even more creepy. This was definitely his vehicle by the description he gave. He messages me saying if I was still bringing the fog machine and that he sees us. We didn't even tell him what car we were in, and he was just bullshitting. So we would have to meet him up anyways, or he would just follow us home. My mom decides to drive home, and I agreed because this guy just sat there completely ignoring the messages of meeting up in the front of Menards. The guy was being a complete weirdo, and he wasn't even there for the fog machine. He was there for other reasons, and we knew it. We definitely made the right choice on leaving, because he was still sitting in the same spot he was when we first pulled in. The creepiest thing was that the account was no longer available the next day. Now, the story wasn't as scary as people probably thought, since we caught on to what the guy was doing. But still, if we proceeded with what we were doing, I really don't think I'd be typing this right now. This was by far the creepiest thing I've ever experienced, and this really taught a lesson to watch out with who you meet up with online, because who knows what might happen, and thank goodness we made the right decision that night. I'm a female, and I was 13 at the time of this story. My brothers MJ and I were working with our dad doing landscape work around the city. We were working in a rundown part of the city, and by then I had grown used to dirty old guys honking at me and hanging their heads out their windows to stare at me. However, what I'm about to tell you is something that I never expected to happen. We were all mowing behind an old pizza shop in a little campground. I was in deep concentration with my mower lines, making sure they were even. I happened to glance up ahead of me. Across the campground was a gas station. From there, a semi-truck was pulling out and creeping into the lawn that I was cutting. I was a little startled, but I thought maybe they were trying to make a wide turn to get into the road. However, they just kept creeping closer and closer to me, and then farther into the lawn. The men in the truck were staring down at me with sinister looks. I was frozen in fear. I didn't think they would actually try to kidnap a child in broad daylight in front of all these people, but the truck just kept coming. It was finally 15 feet from me. One of the men glanced up at something behind me. Then the other man quickly jerked his head up. The truck came back to a stop, and they quickly started backing up. I then looked back to see what they were looking at. My older brother M was coming by with his mower. I then looked back at the semi-truck, and it was zooming off down the road. They must have thought I was a good target because I was distracted by my mower, despite there being people all over the campsite. It took them seeing my brother to back off. Needless to say, I quit mowing after that. It could have ended up much worse for me, and I'm so grateful to my brother for showing up when he did. I'd like to share the following story in hopes that younger viewers realize just how unsafe it is to be out alone or out with friends late at night or early in the morning. I recall feeling invincible, that if I was with a friend, nothing bad could happen to us. Well, I was wrong. We came very close to something unimaginable. My friend R and myself, both 16-year-old females, would lie to our parents and say we were sleeping at each other's houses, only to pull all-nighters on the train, buses, visiting friends on the other side of the city, and anywhere but safe at home. One night that I'll never forget, we just left a park that we'd been wandering around, as there was a group of older kids and young adults drinking, and we felt uneasy. As we walked, we had started to pass a large shopping center. It was around 4 a.m., so there were barely any cars on the road and 0 people around. We saw a bright light speeding down the road towards us and slowed down, pulling into the car park of the shopping center where we'd been walking. We saw this truck, knowing it was coming for us, and we leaped over the fence and started walking along the main road. The truck pulled out of the car park and down the road in the direction where we were walking. We just looked at each other and said, "Yeah, we need to run." We turned around and we started to run in the opposite direction the truck was driving down, only for it to do an illegal U-turn and follow us. We were terrified and we had no one to call for help. We jumped back over the fence to the car park, only to be followed back in there by the truck. So we jumped back over the fence, and we then remembered that there was a police station at the end of the highway. We had never ran so fast in our lives. That night I learned what fight or flight was, and boy did we fly. The truck was still following us until we were a few doors away from the police station, only to do another U-turn and drive away when the driver realized we were almost at the police station. Now, you'd think that we would have gone inside and reported that we'd been followed, or at least go home where it was all safe. No, we were way too scared to tell our parents that we lied, so we pretty much just walked around the neighborhood until the sun came up. We were really lucky. To this day, we can't believe we got away. No matter how protective your parents are, don't go out and lie about where you are. It's not worth your safety or your life. You just don't know who else is out there looking for prey. The story starts a month before my 10th birthday, all the way back in 1999. I had very thick glasses and dark curly hair. It was summer, and I was at a day camp sponsored by my Children's Aid, CPS. My mom worked days and my dad nights, and my older sister was 17 or so, and she had moved into her own place, so there was no one at home to watch me and my younger brother who was 8 years old. So off to summer day camp we went. It was only down the road at the complex, which was right behind the police station. And by down the road, I mean go behind my home over the train tracks and literally walk down that road and across one road. It's maybe 10 minutes away if you walk slowly. I usually just walk through the field as there are never any trains. My family would go to the complex almost every day, sometimes as a group, but I never thought anything of not walking there alone. It was basically an open field with grass/hay no higher than my 9-year-old knee. Anyway, we did all the summer camp activities, and it was time to go home between 2:30 to 3:30 p.m. I don't really remember when it was done for the day. I sent my brother ahead as I wanted to talk to a friend of mine. After I was done, about 10 minutes later, I started off home. I walked right past the police station, which had no cars and cops in the area. Not at all weird in my little town. I later found out from my sister's friends that pretty much all the cops were down the road at Timmy's, which was a Canadian coffee shop, which was fairly normal in my town. I had started walking in the field when a car came into the field right in front of me. I wasn't scared. I was in the front of the police station, still in clear view of the station door. Also, the man knew my name, and I thought I recognized him. The man was having an issue with his car, and he asked if I could hold a tool for him. I do this for my dad sometimes, so I thought nothing of it. And again, I was right in front of the police station, so after a small amount of time, he fixed it, and he gave me some change for the help. I started back to going home, but I was then grabbed from behind and put in his van. I had tried throwing the change at him, but I never really had a chance to scream. He then took me down the road where the police station is. If you follow that road, it dead ends at a factory. But just before that, there's a mall at one side, and then an old age home on the other side, with a helicopter landing pad right behind the old age home with trees all around it. The hospital was just up across the road from there. He started touching himself while I was right beside him in the passenger seat. I was able to get the seatbelt off myself and then jump out. He, of course, climbed out on his side, and he was coming around to where I was when I yelled at him, "I'm telling the police!" He ran his fat ass right back into the driver's seat and then took off. I never got to close or slam the car door shut. I then started walking to my friend's, who was halfway between where I was and home. I never even thought of going into the mall or the old age home, or even walking to the hospital. About 5 minutes into the walk, I saw a female adult, and I ran to her. Now, I'm Canadian, so there's both English and French people in my town. This lady happened to be French, so I told her the best I could that I had been kidnapped. The sweet lady brought me all the way home, about 30 to 45 minutes, and I spoke to my father about what happened. My mom was still at work for about another hour. By the time I finished changing, my dad brought me right to the police station. I was there for hours. My mom got home to an empty house and was relaxing when my brother walked in. She asked him where everyone was, to which my brother then replied, "JJ got kidnapped, so Dad took her to the station." So off she went. Anyway, I was in a small room by myself at some point, with also some male cops for quite some time. My dad left for work after my mom got there. At some point, the police who were interviewing me talked to my mom, and they asked if I'd make up a story like this, to which she replied, "Never. She would never make up a story like that." After some more time, they drove me across the street to look at the field to see if I would see the change I threw or car tracks there. There were none. But keep in mind, this was like 2 hours after the kidnapping. So they drove me down to the landing, and there were tracks there, so they did finally believe me at this point. The next day, my mother went to the complex to withdraw us from the day camp, as they were not supposed to let us leave without a family member picking us up. My sister was late or forgot. I can't remember. Once there, she explained to the camp leaders that we would not be returning. When she was overheard by the owner of the place, he was there while camp was in session the day before, and he told my mom that he had to threaten a man who was watching us swim. He was told to stop and that he couldn't stay there unless he was buying something, that or to go swimming. The man made a few phone calls, and he seemed to be following the day camp group all around. The owner had video and contacted the police. From what I'm told, he was found in 2 weeks in a city just an hour away. They didn't arrest him, as they wanted the van that he kidnapped me with. It took 2 weeks for him to go to the van. On my birthday, I was doing a photo lineup. I picked him on the 30th out of like 50 photos that they had showed me. I got him on my first try and refused to look at any more photos. We later found out that I was his 21st victim. There were 20 girls and 1 boy. We also found out some other things, like how 2 weeks before I was kidnapped, his wife was leaving him and taking his 2 stepdaughters with her. They were, after all, her daughters. She found out that he was molesting them, and she had gone to the police where they live in Montreal. The police didn't even bother to look into him. Had they looked into him, they would have found him stalking me. I was told that I had actually met him at a camping ground my sister took me to that was half away to Ottawa, about 30 minutes out of town. I didn't remember that meeting for a long time. He had introduced himself as Mike, but I had met 2 guys named Mike that day. I only remembered the 16-year-old handsome boy with long brown hair and abs, and I told the cops that. I was about 14 or 15 when the memories suddenly came back. I was swimming in the waterhole, and I was looking for a raft. There were dozens of rafts in the shallow end, and there was a man with half a dozen all around him there. And there wasn't too many people in this area, just him. It was Mike. I asked if I could take a raft, and he agreed to give me one. I took it, and I left back to the crowded area. He had been following me since then. When I remembered that, it really freaked me out to my core. He usually attacked girls in school bathrooms. After he went to jail, he would call up random homes asking for children, claiming to be a radio DJ with tickets for the kids. There were hundreds of calls before someone dialed the number back and got the county jail. These charges were added to the rest. He was, to my knowledge, never charged for all the crimes against me, just a minor one. They wanted to make sure they could rearrest him if the charges for all the other kids failed to get him a sentence. He was eventually sentenced under the Paul Bernardo Act, and as a dangerous offender cannot be paroled without proof that he would not reoffend. He still tried to have the dangerous offender title removed after about 9 years. Let's skip ahead a bit to the future. I was unknowingly pregnant with my first child. I freaked out and we moved out of the town that I grew up in. I didn't want to be there if he was able to get out of jail. Thankfully, he refused mental help, and the phone calls were taken as proof that he really did plan to continue to harm children. He's still in jail to this day. I never moved back home, and I don't plan to. I'm much happier and healthier living elsewhere. I still have panic attacks and anxiety from all this, and as an adult with 2 little ones, I'm always near my kids, and I never let them get too far. I still think back and remember how scared he got when I told him I was going to the cops. He could have killed me and molested me for saying I'd tell. I was lucky to get out of this within 45 minutes with nothing but a bruise and horrible memories. I still can't believe this adult male who was 33 had turned tail and ran when told off by a 9-year-old. I'm very thankful that he didn't kill me. He could have left me there and I wouldn't have been found for days. I still have the court papers to this day, and some of the things I read there I can't unread. His psych eval, for example. I'm gonna have an article for this story linked in the description if anyone wants to read it. The man's name is Ian Michael Cheeseman. I really wish Canada put people to death. I'd probably be in the front row seat if they did that to him.